Hello, this is Lisa Shea, and today we're going to paint a sea turtle, and we're going to do it in watercolors with a crayon wax resist technique using white crayon. So for this we need watercolor paper, a pencil with an eraser, the watercolor set in whichever colors you want to paint your turtle with, and then brushes, water, and the white crayon to be able to do the wax resist with. So we're going to start by drawing lightly the shape of the turtle. Normally when you do watercolors, if you draw more darkly, you can still erase it after you put the watercolors down, so it's not much of an issue. But since we're going to be tracing white crayon over the top of these lines, that means it'll be much harder, if not impossible, to delete these lines. So you want to go reasonably light with them so that they don't stand out as the key feature of this painting that we're doing. Although if you like very strong pencil lines, that's certainly up to you. So we will start by drawing an ovalish shape for the shell of it. I'll just erase a little bit of the extra line. Erasers are good and handy. Let you adjust what you're up to. Give our turtle a little bit of a neck. The design that I tend to like has a central row of plates down the back of the turtle, but you can do whichever design you want. It's wholly up to you. This is your turtle that you're drawing, so you can draw any style you want. I happen to like one that has these little curved shapes down the center spine and then scallops along each edge. So we'll draw these in. Again, draw them sort of lightly. You want to be able to see where they are so that you can trace them with the white crayon without them becoming the key feature of the overall image. Now I'll note in this one here that I'm doing with the model that I did use the white crayon for it, and the white crayon creates all of the little nooks and crannies that you can see there so that the water didn't go over the tops of them. But you can also do this if you want to by just leaving the spots blank. So in this one I just left the spots blank and the water went where I painted it. So you can do different techniques if you don't have a white crayon. You can just leave the holes in essence. But the technique that I'm showing you here today is the white crayon technique. So the white crayon creates those gaps between the different colored painted areas. So I'm drawing down the sides of the shell to get those pieces in. So you're seeing this is a fairly simple turtle design. You can make yours fancier if you want to. We got a head, we got a flipper or two. I never seem to make these flippers long enough for some reason. I always think that they seem too long, but then when you look at an actual sea turtle, they have these super long front flippers. So you can make them as long or as short as you want. I found if you make them short, it almost looks like a baby turtle, as if it has the tiny little baby turtle flippers, which is sort of cute too. So it's up to you. Back flippers have a little bit of wiggle on the inside. You could call those toes, I suppose. And then you give it a little tail. And then a little bit of scalloping along the sides. On a real sea turtle, the scalloping is more solid, I suppose depending on the type of turtle you're talking about. But this is our fantasy turtle that we're doing, so you can do them however you want to. So we finish up the scalloping. And keep in mind that you're going to be tracing these with crayons, so try to give a little space. Don't make these shapes too teeny because then the crayon will be hard to trace. So now this is a regular white crayon. There's nothing special about this crayon. And we're tracing over each of the lines that's in question here. So what you're doing is you're creating a barrier, a blockage between where the watercolor paint is going to go down and the paper, because we don't want the watercolor to go on these lines, and that'll create the nice white line effect. So we're going to paint all of this with watercolors afterwards, but the paint won't go into these white line areas. So we will finish up drawing everything over with the white crayon. It can be hard because, I mean, when you're looking at this video, you can barely tell where the white crayon is and where it isn't. So what can help is to look at the paper from an angle and see where the light is reflecting, and that'll give you a better sense of what you have drawn over and what you have not yet drawn over and still need to get to. Because it would be pretty easy to be working on this and then forget to trace some lines, and then afterwards when you get into the painting process realize that you've made a mistake. And it'll just create a different effect for your painting. It's not a life or death thing, but certainly it's good if your intention is to trace all the lines, to try to do your best to make sure that you've got all the different lines traced. And you can see as we're doing this that the crayon is not a precise tool, and you don't want it to be, because you want the line to be fairly thick. That's creating the blockage for the watercolor paint. So it's good when you're making your drawing and planning out what you're going to do to have these lines fairly separate from each other. Even those little scallops at the edges of the turtle shell are sort of on the small side, but they still do work. But these nice big sections here are much better for this kind of technique. So we're going down the shell. We're getting all the aspects of it. And then you sort of look at it from the side and try to figure out, did I get this section already? And it never hurts to go over a section again to make sure it's nice and dark. That it's going to do its job of keeping the watercolors off of the paper. This is a nice meditative kind of style of doing it, because during this section you've already drawn it, so the challenging part of drawing the shape is done, and you're just tracing it out and making sure that you've got all the pieces done. Alright, so you look at it from an angle, you try to figure out if you've gotten all the pieces, if there's anything left that you need to trace with your crayon. Technically you could use rubber cement too, but rubber cement's a lot harder to paint this precisely. The benefit of rubber cement is that when everything is done, you could rub at the rubber cement and get it back off again, so then you're just left with the watercolor paint and then the paper. You don't have the white crayon there. But I like having the white crayon in there. I like the textures that it creates for you. Alright, just getting the last pieces that I can tell are not drawn on there. And again, if you look at it from the side, you can see the glint where the crayon is, and that gives you a sense of what you still have to work on. And again, even if you have done a piece before, it's fine to go back and do it again. And just make sure you get a nice thick border around everything. I like to do sea turtles. They're a serene, peaceful kind of creature. And I like turtles in general because they can draw their heads in, and they're sort of a sign of carrying your home around with you and always being safe wherever you are. What I'm doing here is drawing some free-form shapes into the flippers, and I'll do it into the head as well too, and that'll give some interesting texture into those. Since these are less detailed in how they are, I don't draw these out beforehand. I just put in little random shapes. So then I'll do the little leg flippers. I'm just putting in curves in essence. Fill out the tail. Get to the head. So whatever kind of designs you want are fine. I like to do different ones at different times. Alright, then we get the little bits of crayon off so that they don't cause problems later. Alright, so to recap, what we did was draw crayon on all the lines, and now we're going to do the painting part. When we paint, we're going to paint water all over the shell and the water is going to go on the paper and it's not going to go on the spots that we put crayon down. So this again was the white crayon we used, which is just regular old Crayola or whatever kind of crayons you want. So when we traced the lines, we created areas, and even the little in-between lines, we created areas that the water will not go into. So now we're going to take just water, just regular old plain water, and we're going to start with the shell area. And we're going to put water all over the shell to create a base area of water. The water will go into those big open spaces because we didn't put crayon there, but it's going to stay away from the line areas because we put crayon there, and the crayon makes the water resist. So then when we decide to put some paint in, the paint will go where the water is, but it will not go where the crayon is. So we're going to take a little paint. I'm going to choose blue, but you can choose whatever color paint you want. And you can see how it sort of flows around. I'm choosing to put blue on the top sections and green on the bottom sections, but you can use whatever color system you want. So you can see how it sort of flows and wiggles in the water, but it won't go where the lines are because the lines have crayon on them. So you can just take this at your own pace, make whatever designs you want, and be relaxed about it. The paint is going to flow wherever it flows. So now you can see I'm adding in some green, and I'm adding green into the bottom halves of my little shell pieces. But again, you can do whichever combination pleases you, whatever colors you like, whatever layout you like. And I'm getting the green on there, and because there's water on the shells already, it's flowing out into the watery areas. So you see how this is working? And you can get them to mingle a little, and get the two colors to connect. I like doing these kinds of very watery designs because watching the water flow is very soothing to me. And especially when I'm working on a shape that I like a lot, like this turtle that reminds me of stability and safety. So I'm just going poking around at it, adding a little more blue, adding a little more green. So now see when we do the flipper, see how you can see where the lines are that we had drawn with the crayon? The paint will not go on the crayon spots, and it will stay away. So here we go on this left flipper, and see how the little lines appear sort of like by magic that we had drawn with the crayon? Even though you can't see the white crayon with your eyes, the paint won't stick to it, so it just sort of appears there in the drawing. So that makes it sort of fun. So I'm doing my same green and blue combination. Blue on the top, green on the bottom. But you can use whatever combination or layer that you wish. A little bit for the tail. A little blue on the top. And it's fine if the colors mix with each other, because that's sort of the point here, is that you get this nice blending of colors, the green and the blue and the green, or whatever colors you happen to choose. Whatever you think will be lovely for your turtle. We'll do a little neck bit, and then we'll work on the head here. And see how those lines that I drew in there with the crayon appear because the watercolor and water will not stick in the areas where the lines were. So now we've got a head drawn. Add some little green in there. So whatever colors you want, whatever patterns you want. And this makes it easy for you to draw colors across multiple shapes without having to worry about all of the intermediate lines, because those will just take care of themselves with the white crayon. So I want the shell part to be darker than the rest of it so that the shell catches the eye more. And also when something is darker, it tends to feel as if it's closer to you, so that gives this a bit of a 3D feel when the shell is a little closer to you and the arms and legs are a little further away from you. So the way you can make things darker in watercolors is to make multiple layers. So we put down our first layer of color, and now we're adding a second layer of color. You can see how that starts to get it a little darker. When watercolors dry, they tend to dry a little lighter than they were originally. So going back for a second coat and making things a little darker often helps get things towards your final image of what you wanted it to look like. So just poke away at areas that you want to be a little darker, or if you want to change the color combinations a little, you can do that. I find this to be very meditative and relaxing. So there's only little spots on the sides, and that's okay, just put in whatever fits into your little crayon holes. This is part of the benefit of working on a larger piece of paper versus a smaller one, because you have more space to make these little kinds of details on it. But whatever space you have available will be fine. That will certainly be pretty enough. Add a little more green. Get it to darken up a little more. And you can see how the edges around the shell bits are a little rough, and I like that very much. I like how the crayon is an imperfect drawing tool and creates these little jagged edges. It gives it a more natural kind of look to it. I mean, you could poke at this for hours and hours, but at some point you call it reasonably done and just let it go. I mean, because you could start another one. You can do a whole series of them. The turtle with different colors and different shapes and so on. So let me know if you have any questions at all about painting watercolor using crayon resist technique. You can try it with different color combinations, with different poses, with different kinds of lines that you do in there. Whatever strikes your fancy. And the more that you try it, the more that new ideas come to you about trying different layouts and different shading techniques. So it is all a gentle learning process as you see what you like and what other people think about the things that you're doing. So enjoy your time painting watercolor turtles, and I look forward to hearing your questions and seeing your results. Have a wonderful week.